It's Friday afternoon. We've turned off the phone and thereby guaranteed that no one will call us in the middle of an arrest for disorderly conduct because it's time for another edition of our weekly podcast, Tales from the Brown Desk. I'm Jake Rigney of Rigney Law LLC. With me, as usual, is my law partner, wife, and zombie aficionado, Cassie Rigney.
Hello. Ha ha ha.
Our host is Terry. That was a very convincing laugh. Good job. Everyone is convinced that I am now hilarious. Excellent work. Thank you. I appreciate that. Our host is Terry Ohm. Friendly reminder, Tales from the Brown Desk is a free-flowing conversation involving two foul-mouthed attorneys. It may include graphic descriptions of sexual activity, violence, and traffic law. It's almost certainly unsuitable for children. Listener discretion is advised. Here is Terry.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Jake and Cassie.
Hello.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about some things that are going on in Indianapolis and what the city is trying to do to resolve some issues that it sees. We're going to talk about some Indiana Court of Appeals opinions, encounters with the police, and how they go bad. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is Senate Bill 335, which deals with panhandlers.
Oh, gosh.
Is it currently against the law to panhandle?
Yes. Yes, it is. Now, I have not read the Panhandling Statute in quite a while, so this is going to be real informative because I'm way up to date on it. But there are a lot of laws about panhandling, and they're occasionally found unconstitutional. It is illegal, I think, to do it within 20 feet of like a bank, and I've read they're trying to make it even harder to panhandle.
Yeah, the Senate bill that's trying to be passed right now will extend the 20 feet to 50 feet and also include other places such as public monuments, businesses, public parking garages, and parking meters. When I think about all the parking meters in downtown and the garages, I'm not sure where the panhandlers would go to ask for help.
Yeah, like so alleys, basically. Like the crossroad of two alleys away from where anyone will ever walk. Yeah, that's where they can still panhandle.
I would suggest institutions like Wheeler Mission.
Right, but even that's got... You can't panhandle outside.
No, I meant that's what you do instead of panhandling is use the resources available to you.
Some people think that this bill would further criminalize poverty. Do you agree with that stance, or do you think that it'll benefit the panhandlers in the city?
Well, it certainly won't benefit the panhandlers in the city. Does it criminalize panhandling? Not technically, right? Or does it criminalize poverty? Not technically, right? Because it doesn't say if you're poor, you can't do this, that, or the other. It basically just says you can't ask anyone for money in these places. And it doesn't matter if you're rich or you're poor. Of course, rich people have no reason to go ask you for money. So it disproportionately affects poverty, people who are poverty-stricken. There's no question about that. I suspect if you ask the legislators who wrote the bill, they'll tell you that. Well, of course, yeah, it's because all the poor people asking for money. Cassie, what do you think? Should we make it harder on those folks, or?
I would like to see, institutions and resources and, things to go to fixing the problem instead of pushing it under the rug, which is ultimately what I think it does. You have this, whitewashed city for all the nice white people to come and spend their money and ignore the fact that we have serious problems that we need to invest our resources in to fix, because limiting their ability and moving them out of the way doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It actually brings up an issue that kind of drives me crazy about criminal law generally, right? And it's exactly what the legislature is trying to do here with this. They have decided to try to make it the police's problem to fix something. They've got the situation, and they're like, okay, here's what we'll do. we'll get the police to fix it by making it illegal, making it a C misdemeanor to do X, Y, and Z. When the police are not in any way equipped to actually deal with this problem, right? There are hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 homeless dudes wandering around downtown on a given day, and there's like 12 cops, especially during the day. If you don't count all the ones in the city-county building protecting the judges and everyone else, right? The people actually walking on the street making arrests. There's like 12 of them. They're never going to catch all the panhandlers and stop them from panhandling in the first place. Even if they could, all they would do is take them to the Marion County Jail, where there's no room to keep them. So what's going to happen? They're going to spend maybe 12 hours in jail getting processed, and then they're going to get kicked right back out onto the street, downtown, where the jail is, and what are they going to do? They're going to go right back to panhandling. The misdemeanor courts in Marion County are going to get clogged up with panhandling cases that they don't care about, and that the prosecutors don't care about prosecuting if they even bother to file them. The legislature wants to show, I don't know, Hyatt or Marriott or somebody, I don't know, that they care and that they're trying to make it better, so they pass this law to make this the police's problem when the police has no realistic opportunity to do anything about it. Because the only way you're going to stop panhandling is by helping people in their lives so they don't need to panhandle anymore. That's how you do it. You don't do it by locking them up. That's not going to stop them.
There were a couple of entities that have voiced their support for this amendment, and that's the Indy Chamber, Visit Indy, Hilton Indianapolis downtown. They feel the panhandlers negatively affect their profits and that their customers don't like to be bothered by being asked for money.
You reminded that there are poor people? I'm sure they don't.
Yeah, you get a whole army of Marie Antoinettes out there asking why they don't just eat cake.
So another thing that's going on in Indianapolis is there's been an increase in homicides this year compared to last year, and the city has been actively trying to combat that. One of the things that Mayor Hogsett wants to do is he wants to increase policing in specific areas, like targeted policing. What do you think about this?
So here's the thing about that. What's Mayor Hogsett's motivation for doing that? I don't know. You'd have to ask him. But when you increase the sort of targeted policing in a particular neighborhood, they usually increase their policing in neighborhoods that are overwhelmingly African American. And that leads to a larger percentage of African Americans getting arrested for crimes. It's part of the systemic, what people call systemic racism. It's not that the police are actually going around thinking, I want to arrest a bunch of black people today and no white people. But if you put all the police in African American neighborhoods, mostly they're going to catch the African American criminals and not the white criminals. And so, unfortunately, it creates this system where African Americans get punished for their crimes at significantly higher rates. If that's what the mayor wants to do to fix it, it's only going to exacerbate that problem. Will it stop crimes? I don't think so. The reason I don't think so is because people are not more likely to commit murder if they think they're going to get away with it. People don't think about murder and getting caught when they do it. Usually it's a spur of the moment kind of situation. The number of murders that happen in Indianapolis that are planned and thought out, where the guy's thinking about it for a day and he decides, okay, here's what I'm going to do and here's how I'm going to do it. That doesn't happen very often. Usually it's just like, oh crap, bang, 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 someone's dead. They don't have time to think, oh, well, I wonder if there's a police patrol around. Shoot, they've been patrolling this area a lot more lately. So you need to fix the other contributing factors that cause these problems. The police's job is to catch the guy who did it, not to prevent him.
Did you have something to add, Cassie?
No, I mean, I prosecuted on the interdiction side, which is for drugs, trying to get in front of crime, like intercepting things. But homicide is, it's not being thought out. So it's not the kind of crime that you can necessarily interdict before it happens, other than, keeping people off drugs, making sure people have employment opportunities, back to, helping these communities. These problems get worse. The violence gets worse, as economic and social economic problems get worse. They're corresponding. And I don't know when we're going to learn that a bigger stick isn't going to fix the problem.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, it's a very rational response to a very irrational problem. And so that's why I'm kind of skeptical about it.
So next we're going to talk about an Indiana Court of Appeals opinion. It is in a case of Davis versus the state of Indiana. His case is interesting because he went up on appeal because he was claiming that he was sentenced with double jeopardy. Can you explain to the listeners what double jeopardy is?
Yeah, so in Davis, because Davis is the drug dealer, right? In
Right.
Lafayette, yeah. So I guess starting from the beginning, the double jeopardy clause in the U.S. Constitution prohibits the government from convicting you twice for the same crime, essentially. It's a way to prevent the state from hacking the system, right? Because otherwise what they could do is they convict you of, pretend you murdered someone, for example. They convict you of reckless homicide. And then when you get out, they try you again and convict you of voluntary manslaughter. And then if you get out after that, they just charge you with a new crime and convict you again for murder, and just keep sending you back for the same crime over and over again. Founders wanted to make sure that the state didn't try to do some dirty shit like that. So they put this in the Constitution so that you can't try someone twice for the same crime. The other thing it prevents is it prevents the state from trying you again if you win the first trial, right? So if you go to trial and the jury finds you not guilty, without that, the state could just file the charges again, get a new jury, take another shot at it, try you over and over again until they, till they get their conviction and get to send you to prison. Double jeopardy clause prevents you from doing that. It's been interpreted in ways that apply well beyond what I just described, and include sort of using the same evidence to convict you of two different crimes and then run those crimes consecutively, or the sentences for those crimes consecutively. I think in Davis's case, what they ended up deciding was that, because Davis went on a long spree, he was based on the description in the Court of Appeals opinion, he was a mid-level drug dealer. So he was selling methamphetamine and heroin, both in sort of street-level transactions, but also in larger amounts. I mean, sometimes thousands of dollars of methamphetamine in a single transaction. And he got convicted of dealing heroin, dealing meth, and conspiracy to deal at least one or both of those as well. And he's like, well, you can't convict me of conspiring to deal the thing that I also got convicted of dealing. And the Court of Appeals eventually was like, yeah, we can. You were a drug dealer for a long time there, bro. I mean, he went years selling all these different illegal substances and selling them to the police and to undercover to civilians who didn't realize they were working for the police and all sorts of other things. But the Court of Appeals did say that it was inappropriate to run his sentences for all those crimes consecutively, because they have a rule essentially when we're talking about dealing where the police have essentially instigated the situation, that they can't run those consecutive. The police can't just go back and buy more heroin from you over and over and over and over again and get another 10 years tacked onto your sentence every time, because they know you're doing it. If they should just arrest you after the first one and be done with it.
Because that's kind of what happened in Davis's case, where he was enticed by police to make these controlled drug deals numerous times. how many times does a cop need to do that to arrest him? Like, what was the purpose of doing it again and again and again and again?
Well, they can do it just once. I mean, it's to ensure conviction. That's it. I mean, they could do it once.
Right. And sometimes I think they do that so that defense attorneys can't come in and argue later, well, look, it was a one-time thing. He just, the guy was like, can you get heroin? And he was like, yes. And so we went and got him some heroin. It didn't even mark it up. It was just like, sometimes defense attorneys will try to minimize dealing by, claiming it was just once and it was his first time ever and you caught him. Come on. But, obviously when they do a years-long sting on a guy, he can't argue that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I noted was through the numerous controlled buys, the police used an undercover officer and unwitting informants. What happens to those informants? And how do they find
to be
them?
honest, if they wanted to, they could charge them with dealing, straight dealing themselves.
Absolutely.
Dealing is only the transfer of possession from one person to another. I actually knew a drug prosecutor who had it in his head that he wanted to charge everybody in a circle of individuals that were found smoking a joint with dealing marijuana. Technically, under the law, they could, and luckily, even within the narcotics prosecution division, the other prosecutors were inclined to tell him that was being excessive. But no, those people are dealing, and they could have been charged and prosecuted to the same extent that Davis was. You don't have to get money. You don't have to, get anything of value.
Yeah, I mean, all those unwitting informants essentially took heroin and handed it to a police officer. That's all it takes to prove dealing. People are, a lot of times they're confused. They think that you have to trade it for money, or you have to turn a profit on it. Like, well, if I just bought it for $50 and I give it to the guy and he gives me $50, that's not dealing because I didn't make any money. Wrong. In fact, you can lose money on the deal. You could buy it for $50 and then sell it to somebody for $30.
Could you give it away and be considered dealing?
Yes.
Transfer of possession. That's all it takes. Give it from me to you.
Yep. The legislature has made it really easy to prove dealing so that they can make it easier for police officers to arrest people for dealing.
I guess I wanted to come back around to why the police would have done such a long investigation when they only needed one. Another reason I suspect, and you can tell as the weights go up, is that they were probably trying to build a big enough case. One, secure conviction, hopefully avoid trial, even if you can undo one or two of the deals. They've got 5 of them. And, it doesn't do any good to convict them of more than one anyway, as far as stacking. But they were probably trying to get enough to go up the food chain because ultimately they want a bigger and bigger fish. And, it would not surprise me if at some point they approached Davis and wanted him to then buy on their behalf as well. Particularly on the time frame that this case was over. That was a particularly long investigation, in my opinion.
Yeah, they ended up doing a couple of deals that were worth, I think, a few $1,000s, and they found 5 figures worth of money, I think, in a car Davis was attached to. So overall, they took several thousand, more than $10,000, maybe even more than $20,000 from him. Those are the kind of levels that could get you charged federally, but they don't have to. And so it's entirely possible they were also trying to build a Fed case against him. Or, like Cassie said, they were trying to get enough so that they could scare him with a Fed case into making him work for them so that they could then get the bigger supplier, the upper middle management of the drug supply chain. But Davis apparently didn't want to go down like that, so he went to trial and lost.
I think this Court of Appeals opinion mentioned that the police listened to a jail call. In the jail call, he said that he had some money stashed in a car. Is it common for police to listen to jail calls?
Kind of depends. Tippy canoe, yeah. When I was a prosecutor, I never did. That was something I'd have an intern do if I was interested in somebody. So I think it's prosecutor to prosecutor. There are other prosecutors in Marion County, they listen to all their jail calls. I hated them. They're terrible to listen to.
Do they also read their mail? Like, is there any communication someone in prison can relay to another and it not go through someone else's ears or eyes?
Not definitely. So you have to understand sort of how the system works, especially with jail calls, but also with mail and everything else. It is all subject to monitoring and recording. And in the situation of jail calls, they are all recorded. So it's all on a server somewhere, being kept. But that doesn't mean anyone actually went and listened to it. They do not always live monitor your phone calls from jail. There are too many of them, and there are too many people in jail and not enough people to listen to all of them. But they can go search them, and they can search them through all sorts of different means, by phone number called, by inmate, by a lot of other ways. So if they think that something interesting is going to be in a call or is about to be made in a call, then they can go listen to them. And that can be the basis for a search warrant. It can add additional evidence to your case. It can cause all sorts of problems for a defendant if they don't heed the warning. There's a warning at the beginning of every call.
So another Indiana Court of Appeals case that I wanted to get your opinions on is a case, Carter versus State. This is another instance of a defendant claiming double jeopardy, where he was sentenced for a crime with the same evidence.
Yeah.
One of the things that stood out to me when I read this opinion was how swift the cops were to make the arrest after a hostile crowd gathered.
Yeah.
Is that a reason to arrest somebody if a crowd is gathering to...
I think it could be a lawful basis for the officers to relocate an investigation. It sounds like they believed they had enough to do an arrest and just move on.
Yeah, and reading the case, the officers did have, I think, probable cause to arrest at least, was it Carter? Yeah, Carter.
Yes.
They did have probable cause at least to arrest Carter for public intoxication. They can arrest a person if they have probable cause to believe they committed any crime in the police's presence. So when they approach a car and they find Carter sitting in a car in public, in a public parking lot, and he's intoxicated and is in any way annoying even to them, well, that's good enough for them to arrest him for that public intox. They ended up arresting everybody in the car because the driver had 3 guns on him, and they saw the other 2 guys in the car like pushing things toward the driver. Side note, most people do not carry 3 handguns. You only have 2 hands.
I think John Wick carries more than 2 handguns.
That's true. John Wick. But the dude sitting in the parking lot of an apartment complex in Indianapolis does not have John Wick's needs.
Like, we are not talking about John Wick.
Right. He has neither John Wick's skills nor an entire city of bounty hunters looking for him so that they can collect an enormous bounty.
You don't know Carter.
That's true. I don't know Carter. Maybe he's really John Wick, and that was the but I'm positive that's not the case because Carter got caught. John Wick would not have gone down like that. John Wick would still be floating around the city with his 6 handguns and his 3 knives and his machete. And
I think that'd be limping around the city.
Yeah, that's true.
So going back to the hostile crowd.
Yeah.
When I read that, and I read it numerous times throughout the opinion, the picture that formed in my head was the crowd was hostile against the police.
Yes.
What would be reasons for that?
Well, the status of the relationship between people in certain neighborhoods and the police is uneasy, I guess, is probably a fair way to describe it. And there have been several publicized instances of police kind of overreaching. And the police also have a tendency to be very concerned for their safety. To a certain extent, I understand that. Being a police officer, especially a patrolman in the city, is not an easy job, and it is dangerous. And unfortunately, sometimes some bad things happen to them. So they all generally have families and loved ones they want to go see every night. Totally sympathetic to the idea that they need to be safe. At the same time, the few bad apples that have caused serious problems in places all across the country have caused people in some places to be very wary of the police, to record them at every opportunity, to voice their displeasure pretty regularly, and sometimes in a way that causes officers to fear for their safety. So it's an unfortunate situation when that happens. I don't think that it really helps anyone when it does. It just got those guys arrested quicker.
What it did do, though, they didn't finish the shooting investigation. So it was 1 for the neighborhood, 0 for the cops. I read that. No, they said they picked up with their B misdemeanors and went on. You know, if they would have gotten shell casings and did ballistics and who knows.
Yeah, I mean, Cassie has a point there. The officers were called there because of a alleged shots fired run, and they never ended up being able to investigate who was shooting or what was going on because of that situation. And that's, Cassie describes it as 1 for the neighborhood and 0 for the cops. I wouldn't say it's a contest, but that does sound a little bit like, obstruction of justice via mob, which isn't any better than what the bad apple police officers do, in my opinion. But if the police really wanted to chase down all that situation, they could have sent more than like the 2 officers who had to respond to that scene too. So sounds like it was an pretty unfortunate situation for everyone. I'm glad no one got hurt.
So it's not uncommon for the police to go undercover. And as a lay person, I've always heard that if you ask someone if they're a cop and they are a cop, they have to tell you, and then you're clear. Is that the case?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
That always makes me laugh. Just like, really? Do you really think it's that easy? Really?
That is like the second most common misconception I get answering phone calls and from people is that if they're the police and you ask, they have to tell you. It's just not true. Not true at all. They can lie about who they are. They can lie repeatedly, and it's a little silly actually that this myth sort of persists, because if you think about it, if it were true, it would lead to just categorically absurd results, right? So like if you imagine running a drug cartel, and the way if that were true, the way you protect your drug cartel is just every time you're getting ready to talk to one of your associates, you just say, "You're not a cop, right?" Like you just start every conversation with, "You're not a cop, right?" And then go, "Okay, so what are we doing with the drugs today?" "Steve, you're not a cop, right?" "Okay, great." "Oh, hey, Chad, I've known you for 10 years, but you're not a cop, right?" "Okay, great." And then go on with their drug dealing escapades. I mean, can you imagine how awful it would be to work in a drug dealing organization if you had to start every interaction with another employee with, "Chad, you're not a cop, right?" Like it would be terrible.
It would be. So, speaking of undercover cops, there was an Indiana man recently in the news who fell victim to a undercover cop posing as a child online. And this Indiana man ended up walking. He lived in Whitestown. He walked all the way up to Michigan.
What?
You mean like the state of Michigan and not like North Michigan Road?
Actually, it's not Michigan. It's Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin.
Damn.
He walked 350 miles to have sex with the underage girl who was a police. He walked and he hitchhiked. That was 350 miles. If he walked, it would have took him 120 hours to get there.
That's like 5 days.
And he sent photos of him on the way and informed the undercover cop of his progress as he was making his way up to Wisconsin.
Oh, man. That's... So, look, here's the first thing I'm going to say, okay? And I have no idea why having sex with underage people is attractive or interesting to a person. But I don't understand this even more. There is not a single human being in the entire world that I would walk for 5 straight days to have sex with. And I don't mean like 42-year-old me. I mean like 18-year-old me who would do whatever with just about anyone. Still ain't walking to Wisconsin for sex. That's never happening. What on earth is going on?
You can't tell me he didn't pass an acceptable piece on the way. I mean, like, come on.
Well, the piece has to reciprocate, Cassie. But still, yikes. I mean, that's just... I hope he got to take a rest before he had to come back and go to jail, because that's just...
Well, he got arrested in Wisconsin, right? It was a Wisconsin sting.
Right.
And they enticed him into... He walked all the way just to get arrested.
Can you imagine being the cop on that, by the way? You're like, okay, I got this guy coming. Wait, hold on. I thought he said he was going to be... He's walking.
I'm sure they laughed the whole way every time, like, look, keeping up with him, like, oh.
I mean, you can drive from Indianapolis to Wisconsin or to Milwaukee in like maybe 5 or 6 hours, I think. And so you think like they were like, okay, so he's leaving from Indiana. He said he's on his way. He'll be here in, I don't know, 6 and a half, 7 hours. We all got to get ready. Okay, here we go. We're ready. We're going to arrest this child molester. And then 6 hours later, they're like, where is he? And he texts back and he's like, I'm in Kokomo. I'm still on my way. And they're like, are you walking? And he's like, yep.
Well, one of the things he did text to the undercover officer who is posing as a underage kid was that he would like to have 500 kids with her, starting with one within the first year.
That guy obviously doesn't have any kids because 500 is too many to have.
I mean, you stop having sex after the first couple. I don't know what he thinks is going to happen. I don't think he has a good idea of what a family with that many children would entail.
Right. I mean, the dude doesn't even have a car. How's he going to afford 500 kids? He can't even rent a car. What? You do not. How are you going to feed 500 kids? What are you thinking?
So with his 500 kids, I wonder if he would do the same thing as a Florida man. Florida man fell for the same thing. Oh. He fell for an undercover officer who is posing as a 14-year-old online.
Yeah, that happens.
This Florida man left his 3 children at home who were 4, 5, and 7 to go have sex with the 14-year-old.
That's not cool. Not
I wonder if Indiana man would leave his 500 kids at home.
Well, if he would walk.
Makes me wonder if that guy has a misunderstanding of how it works. Like, maybe was he trying to say he wanted to have sex with her 500 times and he thinks every act results in a child?
Yeah, I don't know. It does remind me of that song, though, from the 90s. You remember that song? I will walk 500 miles and I will walk 500 more. Oh, jeez, Indiana man.
Florida man left her kids. Ugh.
Yeah, that's not cool, Florida man. You can do better than that. I have faith in you.
Well, there's another Florida man who got pulled over in a traffic stop and used his baby as a shield.
Were the police shooting, or was it just in case?
It was just in case.
Just in case. Gee.
You'll never take me alive, coppers!
Yeah,
my
he used his
God.
baby as a shield, and they had to have a special team come in and rescue the child.
Special.
Well, and usually you follow up these stories, and then he has like a driving while suspended warrant or something stupid. Did they tell you what the traffic stop was for, or what the underlying, like, before he used his baby as a human shield? Was there another crime of equal or greater seriousness that he had committed before that?
Well, it says the police pulled him over on the interstate due to concerns regarding a child custody Baker Act issue.
Oh.
Oh,
So it was
okay.
kidnapping.
So they think, it was probably just short of a, Amber Alert
Yep.
kind of thing. So that's what it was. But what a great way to say there is, in fact, concern for the safety of this child.
I can't wait for the custody hearing later between mom and dad over who should have custody of this child, between Florida man and Florida woman. It's going to be great because I'm sure she's probably doing awesome too. But Florida man is like, well, I took the kid and I tried to use it as a human shield, but no, give me custody anyway, I swear. And by the way, a special police squad had to be dispatched to rescue the kid. Do you think they have a special police squad for every type of scenario, including like this one? Like there's 5 cops just sitting around like, well, gotta wait till the next time somebody tries to use a baby as a human shield, and then we gotta jump in the van and head that way. Get ready, guys. Always on alert.
I think that would be a pretty boring job.
Except when it isn't, right?
Right. So, a Florida police department got some headlines this week. Not only Florida man, but a police department did. They posted a post on Facebook that says, with the rising health concerns associated with coronavirus, we are offering free testing of your drugs. Being that a large amount of narcotics come from outside of the U.S., we want you to be safe. Bring it to our station and we will test the batch within minutes.
Yeah, this is not a novel trick that the police use sometimes. And I never know if they're serious or if they just think it's funny. But then some guy or someone always falls for it and takes their drugs to the police station to have them tested, and then they get arrested for possessing drugs. It's but yeah, they're not the first police department to do that on Facebook and sort of say like, hey, come get your drugs tested, make sure they're real drugs.
So there's one other news headline that I'd like to share with you before we wrap up. It's not a Florida man or an Indiana man, but a Maryland man. He was arrested after stabbing a woman with a syringe full of semen.
Man, we are going really gross this week.
Where did he stab her?
In her butt.
How did he get
Like in her butt
semen?
cheek?
Yeah, and then when she turned around and confronted him, he said it felt like a bee sting, didn't it? And apparently this isn't the only person that he has stabbed with a syringe full of semen.
How does one obtain a syringe full of semen? I'm asking for a friend.
Well, I would assume, I would hope it's his own or not. I don't. You don't want it to be anybody's, but I would. I mean.
Yeah. Side note: we do not choose the topics of this conversation. Terry chooses the topics. So, in case somebody wants to accuse us of a hostile work environment later, Terry chose these articles, not Jake and Cassie. We're not making her talk about syringes full of semen. Her choice. Gross. Real gross.
Did he say why?
He didn't say why. He didn't say why.
I'm going to go with dumb.
Yeah,
He's dumb.
But what kind of charges can be brought against someone like this? Would this be a sexual assault because semen injection was involved, or is it just...
No, that's a good question, though. So in Indiana, what immediately comes to mind is battery by bodily waste. So battery by bodily waste is a felony. I am certain that semen qualifies as bodily waste, especially after you do whatever it takes to get it into a syringe. But stabbing somebody with a syringe in a sort of non-consensual, uncontrolled way is also probably battery with a deadly weapon in Indiana. Because, I mean, people don't realize this, but you can get stabbed in the leg and die. Like, you have arteries and veins in your torso and in your groin area and in your legs where you get it nicked, you're going to bleed out before you ever get to the hospital. Because you have, a lot of blood pumping through those large arteries deep in your legs and in your groin area. So doing that to somebody like that, I mean, there's a chance you could kill them. That's what it takes to call a syringe a deadly weapon. In Indiana, anything can be a deadly weapon. It just depends on how you use it. Obviously, a knife and a gun can be a deadly weapon, but a television can be a deadly weapon. A hammer can be. It also might not be. It depends on what you're trying to do with it. And a syringe can be, depending on what you're trying to do with it. Stabbing somebody with it, that might get it done.
So when you say bodily waste, does that extend beyond humans? Because Florida man also got himself arrested for throwing cow manure on another this week.
Florida man will not stop.
Well, first, I don't know what the Florida laws are.
So if that happened here in Indiana, is it okay to throw cow manure on another?
It is certainly not okay. Off the top of my head, I do not know if the battery by bodily waste is limited to human body or mammal body, but it is certainly a crime. Either way you cut it, whether that's the one that it is, I'm not exactly sure.
Let me check my moral philosophical books from college for a minute to see if throwing poop at somebody is amoral or not. Yes, it is. That's not okay. We at Rigney Law do not condone the use of throwing cow manure at people. But yeah, I don't know either. I don't know if throwing non-human waste is battery by bodily waste. It's definitely battery, so it's an A or a B misdemeanor. I can't think of anything much more rude than throwing cow poop at someone.
We actually put it in a bucket and then dumped the bucket on someone, so it's more than just throwing like a handful.
I always think of them as like the pies that would be on my grandpa's farm, like frisbee throw it like at someone's neck or something.
Well, the velocity at which it hits you does not matter.
Well, I mean, I'd rather be hit with a dry one than it sounds like the fluid that was collected. Before they dry up, it's pretty soupy.
Yeah. Florida man is just really, really gross this week. He needs some classes or something. That's not appropriate, bro.
He does. That kind of wraps up our Tales from the Brown Desk this week.
Oh, you hear that, Cassie? They're playing our music.
Okay.
Time for me to go to the bank. Additional legal disclaimer. While we may discuss legal issues and provide information regarding the law to our listeners, we do not intend to create an attorney-client relationship with any listener. Our advice may not be applicable or appropriate to your legal issue. Please consult with an attorney you have hired to review your legal situation before you attempt to apply anything we said today. Thanks for listening to Tales from the Brown Desk. If you need help with a criminal law issue, please contact Rigney Law at 317-430-7370. If you have a question for the attorneys you'd like to be addressed on the air on our next podcast, please email us at Terry, that's T-E-R-I, at RigneyLawIndy.com and title your email Podcast Question. The attorneys in this podcast do not comment on their current pending cases. None of this discussion is a comment on a current case or strategy, even if your name is Chad or Steve.